Alright, it's day number 3 on this Sansui D7 display, and I have a feeling today's going to be a turning point. Could go up or it could go down. I'm not sure what the percentage is in my favor at this point. So I just had to verify on this because it's been a while since I looked at this, which way is up and which way is down, because I just wanted to make sure I haven't been looking at it wrong all this time. And it was right. Pin 1 starts down here at the bottom, and we go up in that direction. So if up is up is red. And I just wanted to make sure before I put these in that I had all my ducks in a row here, because this project literally wore me out yesterday. So that's part of the reason I say it could go up or it could go down on this day. So I think the next thing to do is get these out of here. And I took out all these paths here. Oh, this big long ground path that was going adjacent or parallel to my new holes, I cut that back. Got all the holes drilled out the best that I could. A couple of them get a little wobbly, like that one and one there. I can see that's not so straight. There's a couple more that's not so straight either, but you know, it is what it is. It's the best I could do with freehand and where these holes were supposed to lay. So I actually started to get a little bit nervous earlier on this when I was cutting all these traces, and felt a little bit overwhelmed with it, and I don't know, I guess that's to be expected. So I think once I start tying these and I started to get a foundation to work off of, and by a foundation I mean get something set as a reference point, either the top connections or the bottom connections, and just start going down in a row, I think it's just going to alleviate some of that bad feeling. And hopefully things get easier. And there is going to be some confusion here, so there's always going to be room for error, but hopefully that doesn't happen. So I guess it's time to pull these out, and it's time to epoxy our little spacer in. I was holding off to the very last minute on this to make sure something catastrophic wasn't going to happen. It hasn't happened yet, so I think we'll sand our spacer on the front face a little bit and epoxy these things together, and see what happens. It's not a great mate. I don't know if that one even goes to that side. I don't remember if I denoted which was which, but I'm probably just being overcritical because that's how I am. So that's what we're gonna do. Okay, this is the point I'm at here. Just trying to see if any little train wrecks are going to occur here. Obviously, since the spacing in between these is much more than these, at least on this front face they are. In the unit, it's a little bit different, and that's a whole other story I got to get into with what's on the face of the unit there on the lens as far as the blackout squares go. So when I put these in here, what I had to do was try to figure out which way to cheat this display. Cheat it up, cheat it down, or what have you, because of this little lineup issue. So what I chose to do was to, since you're going to be looking at this in a window, I mean, keep in mind you got things on this side in the window and labelings on this side in the window. And I couldn't make them all right because you'd have to change the whole entire window. So I just had to pick a point. And the point I picked was the yellow LED, since that's 0 dB. So I tried the best I could to center this yellow LED with this LED here when this was on the board. And it seems like it's off a little bit more than what I thought, because when I just pulled this one out and stuck this one in, the yellow on this side didn't completely line up with this one. It was very minute, but still. So anyway, I just want to make sure that I don't have any little wrecks here before I epoxy these displays together. So I wanted to check and see if this is square, because obviously we don't want one display a little bit higher than the other. It doesn't look real bad. You know, there could be like, I don't know, a 64th of an inch, maybe a little bit more there. So I'm kind of thinking, am I being just that critical? Maybe I want to drill these holes out one size over what I have. I don't know, but I think the key thing here to focus on is when I glue these together and put our barrier in between, like so. Just don't do something stupid. I'm talking to myself here. I'm thinking that I just don't want to do something stupid, and make sure that when I epoxy these, I square this thing. Because I'm kind of working in too many different directions on this at one time. So that's where my thinking is right now. Now the other issue too is whether or not I created a clearance issue, and I don't think I did. And unfortunately, I'm just going off of memory, and honestly, I'm really getting tired of tearing my D5s and my D7s and all the other million ones apart. I'm just getting tired of that, so I'm getting a little lazy here. To make sure that there isn't a clearance issue that I've created here with extending this display down, because this display is going to actually be 4.38 millimeters according to the calipers over there, 4.38 millimeters lower than what the original bottom of the display was. And that, once again, is because of this small area in here that adds up over the entire dimension to be a fairly large amount of error. So I couldn't decide if I wanted to cheat this up or cheat this down or what have you, and then I just ended up, like I said, going off this yellow LED and centering it on what the original LED was, the second down from the top LED. Clear as mud, clear as mud. Alright, we got our board all ready to go. We got our display clamped together with 3 clamps, and what I didn't want to happen kind of happened, and I even took precautions against this, because the things that I know from experience. That's what I base things on. So when I start into something, I usually say to myself, don't do this or don't do that. So my thought to keep in mind was, when I glue these together, to just run a very thin bead of epoxy. I just did it with a Q-tip to make sure that I couldn't get carried away, because carried away with epoxy is just no good. So I just ran a thin bead on the back side here with 100% of intention of keeping the epoxy away from the front face of the LED display. And of course, I don't know where that whole process went wrong, but I ended up getting epoxy on the front face of the display over there, and it's clamped together and it's drying, and I'm not even touching it at this point for at least another day. And I had some problems getting these bottom two LEDs that I tacked onto the bottom of my display. Oops, there we go. I had problems getting those two LEDs tacked on the bottom here, trying to get them aligned up, trying to figure out exactly where to clamp it, and it was a little bit of a mess. It's not perfect, but I'm hoping it's going to be good enough that you won't notice. Like I said, I just didn't know any other way to do this with this, and that's pretty much where I'm at. I had to actually run alcohol down the front face of the LEDs, and I have no idea if the LEDs are going to withstand 99.9% isopropyl. You know, when I was doing that, I just thought, well, here goes your LED display. You're going to be popping every single one of these LEDs out of this horrible little barrier. And I didn't show you this, but I'll do this now because this is something that's important. When I say this horrible little barrier, I'm talking about this cheap nylon frame that these things are snapped into. Getting these LEDs out of here is guaranteed to it's pretty much guaranteed to stress a person out, to be quite frank about it. So I didn't have any intention of maybe having to replace some of the LEDs because of epoxy, and I don't know that that's going to happen, but just in case, getting these things out of here is it's an utter nightmare. There's probably some tool to do that, but I just couldn't come up with it. So we're going to let the epoxy dry and look at the display another time, and check it out and see what it looks like. And our board's all prepped. I took these two little shims off here. I'm not sure where I put them. There was two shims. Oh, here they are. There was two shims on here. I took them off. I checked the clearance from the board face to the very top of the existing display to up here, and it turned out to be, I don't even know where I wrote it down. It turned out to be 8.96 millimeters. That may be a good thing because I remember my spacing here was 9, so maybe that's the magic mathematical numbers that tells me that this is going to work. I don't know what mine's going to be until I stick it in and mount it on the board, but I'm thinking it was very, very close, so there might be some modification to this board to compensate for that if it's enough, and I kind of doubt that it is actually going to be enough of an error factor. So that's where we're at. I cleaned these all off with solder wick. Got everything ready to go, so all I got to do is stick the LED displays in and start at the bottom of the barrel and start wiring them up, and hope I don't forget any of these grounds and paths I cut. There's a really big trip up that is actually making me nervous because there's a skipped pin here on this display. It was a 25 pin, and I just can't even remember right now. It was a 25 pin, but somehow there was some kind of discrepancy when I was going over this in my head. There was like a pin missing, and the problem was there's a skipped pin on the display, which is, let me see, right, flipping this up, I think it's this way. There's a skipped pin right here. You can see the two solder pads that were existing, and I'm not sure why I ended up getting a hole drilled through between those two, but I did. But right there's going to be my pin that's going to fall in the center of them, and you can see that there's a skipped pin here, so I just kind of got to start at the top and work down on the wiring process until I get to this can of worms here, so I don't trip myself up, and by the same token start at the very bottom pin and work my way up. That way, if I got something some loose end up here, I don't have a million different places to look at and say, well, it could go there, or it could go there, or it could go here. It kind of narrows my error rate down by starting at the bottom and the top and working towards here, if that made any sense. So that's where we're at. We'll continue this once the epoxy dries. So please stay tuned, and I'll have to end this video here and carry on with another video on this as I progress. I appreciate you watching. Thanks so much. Have a nice day.